Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings, national baseball champions. The 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings were the first professional baseball team, and they really captured the imagination of the American people, the American nation, and they led directly to 2 years later the beginning of Major League Baseball, or at least an MLB league, the National Association. So this is the beginning of Major League Baseball, the Cincinnati Red Stockings in 1869, because they were all paid. And previously you'd had amateur teams, although there were guys getting played as well. Now they did compete in a league, but it was amateur, the National Association of Baseball Players, which had been around for a while, and then, of course, as I said, 2 years later, it became a professional league, the National Association. The Cincinnati Red Stockings in 1869 played at Lincoln Park in Cincinnati, and the thing is, they were undefeated. They had a record of 57-0, and this really electrified the country and captured the imagination of the American people, and really helped popularize baseball. And as I said, led to baseball becoming a professional sport in 1871 with a professional league. Now, the games the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings played in they played in Cincinnati, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Cleveland, Ohio, Buffalo, New York, in Rochester, Albany, New York City, Springfield, Massachusetts, Boston, Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Wheeling, West Virginia, St. Louis, Missouri, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Syracuse, New York, Portsmouth, Ohio, New Orleans, Louisiana, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, St. Louis, Missouri, San Francisco, California, and Louisville, Kentucky. The games they played were from April 23rd to November 8th. I read a fine book. The title is Baseball Revolutionaries, How the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings Rocked the Country and Made Baseball Famous by Greg Rhodes, John Arardi, and Greg Godges, 2019. In the fall of 1868, the directors of the Cincinnati Baseball Club recruited the best baseball players in the USA and paid them all a salary, the first pro sports team in the USA. This was the birth of professional baseball. Now, their winning streak led to their national fame. They were on the covers of magazines. 1869 baseball, the pitchers threw underhanded from 45 feet from the mound to the plate. There were no fielding gloves, no batting helmet, no chest protector for the catcher, and the catchers were 10 to 15 feet behind the plate. They'd catch the ball on a bounce. An out was recorded if a ball was hit and bounced only once and then was caught by a fielder. Now, this 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings, they had a team song, a number of songs. One of them was called Harry's, and it goes like this, quote, "Our captain is a goodly man, and Harry is his name. Whate'er he does is always right, so says the voice of fame. And as the leader of our nine, we think he can't be beat. For in many a fight, old Harry Wright has saved us from defeat. Hurrah, hurrah, for the noble game, hurrah! Red Stockings all will toss the ball, and shout out loud, hurrah!" Now, New York City was the birthplace of the modern game of baseball. But as I said, the first pro team was in Cincinnati, Ohio. In 1869, in the National Association of Baseball Players, this was a league. They played against the Red Stockings. Were 19-0 in that league, this amateur league. So they finished in first place in the league. Second place, the Brooklyn Atlantics were 15-6-1. Third place, the Philadelphia Athletics, 15-7. Fourth place, the Brooklyn Eckfords, 15-8. Fifth place, the Troy, New York Haymakers, 12-8-1. Sixth place, the New York Mutuals, 11-15. Seventh place, the Washington Olympics, 9-12. Eighth place, the Baltimore Marylands, 7-12. Ninth place, the Washington Nationals, 4-12. 10th place, the Philadelphia Keystones, 3-17. 11th place, the Cleveland Forest Cities, 1-6. And in 12th and last place, the New Jersey Irvingtons at 0-8. On June 25th, the Cincinnati Red Stockings were in Washington, D.C., and they met President Ulysses S. Grant at the White House. And they had defeated the Washington team, and President Grant said, quote, "I believe you warmed the Washington boys somewhat yesterday." Cincinnati's nickname at that time was Porkopolis because of all the, it was a pork packing city where they would slaughter pigs and can the pork. Now, at the time, one could elevate the profile of one city through baseball. This was revolutionized by Cincinnati. So this was really helped make Cincinnati famous and popular and help business. On July 1st, the Red Stockings returned to Cincinnati after a successful road trip east, and they were given a 27-foot-long wooden bat, which weighed 1,600 pounds, as a trophy. In August, they received an invitation to play against the San Francisco team in California. The 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings became the first team to play from coast to coast, introducing first-class baseball to California, and baseball became national. The Transcontinental Railroad had been only completed on May 10th of that year, 1869, finished at Promontory Summit, Utah, just in time for the Red Stockings trip. November 12th was the last game of the season, a victory against the New York Mutuals in Cincinnati, 17-8 Red Stockings. Harry Wright, the manager, wrote in his scorebook, "Veni, Vidi, Vici," a quote from Julius Caesar from ancient Rome, which means "I came, I saw, I conquered." And that meant they finished the year with a record of 57-0. 200,000 fans came to watch those 57 games. Now, the misfortune came in 1870 when for the team, as the city of Cincinnati withdrew unconditional support because it was expensive and fans were fickle. I read another amazing book called If I Never Get Back by Darrell Brock, 1989. This is a time travel book. It's a novel, historical novel. This character travels back in time from 1989 to 1869. And his name is Sam Fowler, and he joins the Red Stockings, becomes a part of the team. Quote, and he said, quote, "I was seized by the wonder of it all. It was Friday, June 4th, 1869. I was riding by open carriage through Rochester, New York, going to see America's first pro ball players." Now, the Red Stockings, when they would win a game, they sang a song in which they said, quote, "We are a band of ball players from Cincinnati City. We go to toss the ball around and sing to you our ditty. Hurrah, hurrah for the noble game, hurrah." Now, the Red Stockings, when their unbeaten streak, they finally lost a game in 1870, and they received a telegram from President Grant who said, quote, "The Santo Domingo Treaty is dead, but the Red Stockings Baseball Club still lives. In this I find consolation." Author William J. Risak, regarding the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings, quote, "Like Alexander the Great, the Red Stockings were quickly running out of worlds to conquer." That's when they decided to travel west. At a banquet in October in San Francisco, before the Reds departed to go back east, there was a toast, quote, "Our national game. May we never think it right to let our exertions in its support come to a short stop." So that was a play on words because George Wright was a shortstop. After the season, the San Francisco Chronicle wrote, quote, "No club in the United States, nor in fact all the clubs put together, have done so much toward creating a furor for baseball and making it so preeminently a national game as the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings." Yeah, you could make the argument that the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings played a major role in baseball becoming the national sport of the United States. Aaron B. Champion was the president of the team. Champion was born in 1842 in Columbus, Ohio. Died in 1895 in London, England, United Kingdom at age 57. Champion assembled the 1869 team with the help of Harry Wright. He was a lawyer active in municipal politics, and he was responsible for the business side of operations of the team. He was very active in politics in Cincinnati, Ohio for the Democratic Party. He traveled in Europe. He ran a street railway system in Charleston, West Virginia for a few years. He was involved with a number of charitable and civic causes in Cincinnati. Aaron Champion went to Antioch College and died of typhoid fever in London, England. After the 1869 successful East Coast trip, and when the team returned to Cincinnati, there was a banquet in which Champion spoke and said, quote, "Someone asked me today who I would rather be, President Ulysses S. Grant or President Champion of the Cincinnati Baseball Club. I immediately answered him that I would rather be president of the baseball club, and the crowd cheered. Aaron Champion." Harry Wright was the manager. He played also player manager. He played center field and pitched. Harry Wright was born in 1835 in Sheffield, England, United Kingdom, and died in 1895 in Atlantic City, New Jersey at age 60. During his MLB playing career, he hit .272 with 222 hits and 111 RBIs. He played amateur baseball from 1858 to 1870 for the New York Knickerbockers, Gotham of New York, and Cincinnati Red Stockings. He played Major League Baseball from 1871 to 1877 for the Boston Red Stockings, Boston Red Caps. He was an MLB manager from 1871 to 1893 with the Boston Red Stockings, Boston Red Caps, Providence Grays, Philadelphia Quakers, and Philadelphia Phillies. He won 4 National Association titles from 1872 to 1875 and 2 National League titles in 1877 and 1878. Harry Wright was inducted in the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1953. He assembled and managed and played center field for the first pro baseball team, the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings. His father was a pro cricket player in England. Samuel Wright. The family moved to the USA when Harry Wright was age 3. He dropped out of school at age 14 to work for a jewelry manufacturer. In 1865, he worked for the Cincinnati Cricket Club. As an MLB manager, he won 1,225 games, lost 885 for a winning percentage of .581. He was inducted into the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame in 2005. In 1869, Harry Wright was the player, manager, scout, traveling secretary, business manager, and PR director of the team. 1869, when the Reds were the first pro baseball team, they played from the Atlantic to Pacific coasts, which did not happen again for 90 years until 1959 when the LA Dodgers and San Francisco Giants moved to California from New York. Harry Wright died on October 2nd, 1895, and his last words were, "2 men out." I'm reading a fine book. The title is Harry Wright, the Father of Professional Baseball by Christopher Devine, 2003. The Reach Guide in 1896 wrote, quote, "Every magnate in the country is indebted to Harry Wright for the establishment of baseball as a business, and every patron for fulfilling him with a systematic recreation. Every player is indebted to him for inaugurating an occupation in which he gains a livelihood, and the country at large for adding one more industry to furnish employment." Christopher Devine wrote, quote, "Harry Wright was one of baseball's most successful players, managers, and innovators. Among his lasting contributions were the implementation of spring training, doubleheaders, and the modern uniform. But most notably, he introduced true professionalism, acknowledged by his peers." Other contributions of Harry Wright include the farm system, pitching rotations, sacrifices, fielder platoons, batting practice, positioning fielders in accordance with the batter's tendencies, fielders backing up each other, scorecards, hit and run, hand signals, long-term contracts, endorsements, and the concept of teamwork. Harry Wright. Asa Brainerd was a pitcher outfielder on the team. He was born in 1841 in Albany, New York, and died in 1888 in Denver, Colorado at age 47. Brainerd, as an MLB pitcher, was 24-53, an ERA of 4.40, and 25 strikeouts. He played amateur baseball in the National Association of Baseball Players from 1860 to 1870 for the Excelsior of Brooklyn, the Washington Nationals, and the Cincinnati Red Stockings. He played Major League Baseball in the National Association from 1871 to 1874 for the Washington Olympics, Middletown Mansfields, Baltimore Canaries. They called him Count. In 1869, for the Red Stockings, Brainerd pitched more than 70% of the innings. He died of pneumonia. He was the team's best pitcher, and it's believed that the term ace, the best starting pitcher of a team, is derived from his name, Asa Brainerd. Asa Brainerd. Doug Allison was the catcher. Allison was born in 1846 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and died in 1916 in Washington, D.C. at age 70. In In his MLB career, he hit .271 with 2 home runs and 140 RBIs. Allison played amateur baseball in the National Association of Baseball Players from 1868 to 1870 for Geary of Philadelphia and the Cincinnati Red Stockings. As an MLB player, he played from 1871 to 1883 with the Washington Olympics, Troy Haymakers, Brooklyn Eckfords, Elizabeth Resolutes, New York Mutuals, Hartford Dark Blues, Providence Grays, and Baltimore Orioles. He was an MLB manager in 1873 for the Elizabeth Resolutes. He was the first baseball player to use a glove, one of the first catchers to stand directly behind the plate to prevent base runners from stealing second. He wore a glove starting in 1870. His brother Art Allison was also an MLB player. Doug Allison served as a private in Company L in the 192nd Pennsylvania Infantry Regiment. In the Civil War, he worked as a bricklayer. Most of the catchers of his era stood 20 to 25 feet behind the plate. Doug Allison played for a post office team in 1882. Doug Allison. Charlie Gould played first base. Gould was born in 1847 in Cincinnati, Ohio, and died in 1917 in Flushing, New York at age 69. During his MLB career, he batted .258 with 248 hits and 111 RBIs. As an amateur, he played for the National Association of Baseball Players from 1867 to 1870 for the Buckeye of Cincinnati and the Cincinnati Red Stockings. In MLB from 1871 to 1877 for the Boston Red Stockings, Baltimore Canaries, New Haven Elm Cities, and Cincinnati Reds. He was an MLB manager in 1875-1876 for the New Haven Elm Cities and Cincinnati Reds. They called him the Bushel Basket. He was the only native Cincinnatian on the 1869 team. He was very affable. He played 12 seasons as a bare-handed fielding first baseman. He worked as a bookkeeper for his father's butter and eggs business. He was a good fielder. After he retired from baseball, he was a police officer in Cincinnati. He's buried in Spring Grove Cemetery in Cincinnati. His grave was unmarked until 1951, when Cincinnati Reds president Warren Giles launched a successful campaign to place a marker on his grave. He was noted for his sense of humor and enjoyed practical jokes and a strong work ethic. Charlie Gould. Charlie Sweezey was the second baseman. Sweezey was born in 1847 in Newark, New Jersey, and died in 1908 in Newark at age 60. During his MLB career, he batted .194 with 39 RBIs. As an amateur, he played from 1860 to 1870 for the Irvington of Irvington, New Jersey, the Buckeye of Cincinnati, and the Cincinnati Red Stockings. He played MLB from 1871 to 1878 for the Washington Olympics, Cleveland Forest Cities, Boston Red Stockings, Baltimore Canaries, Brooklyn Atlantic, St. Louis Red Stockings, and Cincinnati Reds, and Providence Grays. He was an MLB manager in 1875 for the St. Louis Red Stockings. He was one of the first journeyman ball players, a heavy drinker, and often had clashes with his teammates. Charlie Sweezey. Fred Waterman played third base. Waterman was born in 1845 in New York City, New York. He died in 1899 in Cincinnati, Ohio at age 54. As an MLB player, he batted .333 with 81 runs and 38 RBIs. As an amateur, he played from 1865 to 1870 for the Empire of New York, New York Mutuals, and Cincinnati Red Stockings. In MLB, he played from 1871 to 1875 for the Washington Olympics, Washington Blue Legs, and Chicago White Stockings. He was an MLB manager in 1872 for the Chicago White Stockings. Fred Waterman. George Wright was the star player and played shortstop. Wright was born in 1847 in Yonkers, New York, and died in 1937 in Boston, Massachusetts at age 90. He's a brother of Harry Wright. During his MLB career, he batted .301 with 665 runs scored and 326 RBIs. He played MLB from 1869 to 1882 for the Cincinnati Red Stockings, Boston Red Stockings, Boston Red Caps, and Providence Grays. He was a manager of the Providence Grays in 1879. He won 4 National Association titles from 1872 to 1875 and 3 National League titles from 1877 to 1879. He's in the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame. He was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1937. Wright was the best player in MLB in 1869. He established a sporting goods business after his playing career ended, and he helped with the development of golf as a popular pastime. His sons Beals Wright and Irving Wright were pro tennis players. In 1869, George Wright hit .633 with 49 home runs in 57 games. In 1876, he was the first batter in National League history. Wright laid out the first public golf course in the United States, Boston's Franklin Park, in 1890. In 1912, at the Summer Olympics in Stockholm, Sweden, he was an umpire. George Wright was baseball's first superstar. He is the best player in baseball for most of his first 14 seasons, from 1866 to 1879. George Wright. Andy Leonard played left field. Leonard was born in 1846 in County Cavan, Ireland, and died in 1903 in Boston, Massachusetts at age 57. During his MLB career, he batted .299 with 716 hits and 346 RBIs. As an amateur, he played from 1864 to 1870 for the Hudson River of Newburgh, New York, the Irvington of Irvington, New Jersey, the Buckeye of Cincinnati, the Cincinnati Red Stockings. He played MLB from 1871 to 1880 for the Washington Olympics, Boston Red Stockings, and Boston Red Caps, and Cincinnati Stars. He was the first Irish MLB player. In 1876, Leonard and his teammates had the worst fielding day in MLB history on June 14th. The team had 24 errors, and Leonard had 9 in one game. After he retired, he worked for Wright and Ditson, George Wright's sporting goods store in Boston. He won 6 MLB titles from 1872 to 1875 with the Boston Red Stockings and 1877-78 with the Boston Red Caps. Andy Leonard. Cal Mcfay played right field. He also played, during his career, he played first base, catcher, and center field. Cal Mcfay was born in 1849 in Montrose, Iowa, and died in 1926 in San Francisco, California at age 76. During his MLB career, he hit .346 with 555 runs and 449 RBIs. He played amateur baseball from 1868 to 1870 for the Active of Indianapolis and the Cincinnati Red Stockings. And he played MLB from 1871 to 1879 for the Boston Red Stockings, Baltimore Canaries, and Chicago White Stockings and Cincinnati Reds. He was an MLB manager from 1873 to 1879 for the Baltimore Canaries and Cincinnati Reds, 2-time National Association hit leaders, 2-time National Association RBI leaders, and he won 4 MLB titles in 1872, 74, and 75 with the Boston Red Stockings in the National Association, and with the Chicago White Stockings in 1876 in the National League. Cal Mcvey. Dick Hurley was a substitute. He was born in 1847 in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. There's no death information for him. His MLB career was just 2 games, 7 at-bats, no hits. He was an amateur from 1868 to 1870 for the Buckeye of Cincinnati and the Cincinnati Red Stockings and the Washington Olympics. He played MLB in 1872 for the Washington Olympics. In 1916, he was a manager for the Great Falls Electrics in the Northwestern League. Dick Hurley. James Fowler was a substitute. There's no information on him. Oak Taylor was another substitute. Taylor was born in 1851 in Belfast, Maine, and died in 1888 in San Francisco, California at age 37. Oak Taylor hit .218 with 56 hits and 8 RBIs during his MLB career, which was from 1877 to 1884 with the Hartford Dark Blues, Troy Trojans, and Pittsburgh Alleghenies. Oak Taylor. On June 14, 1870, in Brooklyn, the Cincinnati Red Stockings were playing the Brooklyn Atlantics. They had an 81-game winning streak, which ended when they lost against Brooklyn 8-7 in 11 innings. On August 8th, George Wright had an injury. He was out for the rest of the season. In 1870, the Chicago White Stockings came up with a $20,000 payroll, so they were doing the same thing, signing top stars. This was a challenge for the Cincinnati team. There was no team in Cincinnati in 1871 and no pro team in Cincinnati until 1876. 1919, on the eve of the 1919 World Series, there was a parade in Cincinnati honoring, this was how many years? 50th anniversary of the 1869 Red Stockings. So they had a parade in their honor. George Mcvey, Cal Mcvey, and Oak Taylor were in the parade. 1969 was considered pro baseball's centennial, going back to the 1869 Cincinnati Reds. 2019 was 150 years of pro baseball. In Cincinnati, the Great American Ballpark, where the Cincinnati Reds play today, in 2019, they established the 1869 Pavilion honoring the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings, the first professional baseball team. So that concludes today's presentation. You might consider checking out our YouTube channel, Peter J. Ray, REA. So far, we've made 739 history videos in 9 areas: world history, American history, book reviews, poetic tours, Cleveland baseball, family history, autobiography, Cleveland basketball, and Cleveland football. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.